Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our readout of the ICANN Policy Forum that took place in Prague from 9 to 12 June. For those that don't know me, I'm Annalise Williams from auDA's Internet Governance and Policy team. I'm joining you this morning from the lands of the Ngunnawal people, but I know we have folks joining us from across Australia, so I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of country wherever you are this morning and pay my respects to elders past and present. And I extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people present as well. We're joined today by some of our friends and colleagues who participated in the ICANN meeting, which was the 83rd ICANN meeting. Some of them have literally just returned from their lengthy trip, so we're very grateful that you could make the time to come and share your perspectives with us this morning. We're joined by Amrita Chowdhury, Ian Sheldon, Manju Chen, Ram Mohan, and auDA CEO, Dr. Bruce Tonkin. I'll invite each of our speakers to provide a short update, so 4 minutes or so, of the key issues and highlights from their constituent group or from their perspective. And then there'll be time for discussion, and we welcome your input as well. So please pop your questions into the Zoom Q&A tab. And my colleagues and I will keep an eye on that. And please note that this session is being recorded. And just a reminder, given we have a broad audience, if all speakers could try to minimise the use of acronyms where possible, and I might ask one of my colleagues to pop in the helpful ICANN acronym guide in the chat, just in case people find that useful. So I might, Amrita, I'll pass over to you now for highlights from the at-large community. If you just briefly introduce yourself and then your update, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Annalise. Hi, everyone. My name is Amrita. I represent the at-large, which represents the end-user community. I am the chair of the Asia Pacific Regional At-Large Organization, and I'll switch off my video because I think there may be some audio issues at my end. So we had and if I talk about the at-large, for those who do not know, this community, as I mentioned, represents the interests of end users, and it comprises of 15 members at-large advisory committee, also called as ALAC, and 5 regional at-large organizations, which we term as RELOs. So we had about 14 sessions at the ICANN83. The 3 key areas of interest for us was DNS abuse mitigation, because we feel that the DNS abuse is a challenge faced by end users, and it is eroding confidence on the internet. And we find that there is a significant correlation between registration volume and lack of validation to malicious registrations based on the Octo's informal report. And we want to explore options regarding the usefulness of narrowly scoped policy development process to address bulk registrations. And from at large, we would want to find ways to embody the practices of good registrars. And in this context, we had a plenary discussion on what is next on DNS abuse progressing mitigation efforts within ICANN. There were a lot of perspectives shared, and my key takeaway was that while within the ICANN community, there are diverse opinions on the way to approach and the level to which interventions are needed, but all are keen to address this issue. So this was a particularly interesting discussion. The other important agenda was the new GTLD program, the next round, and from at large, we believe that the next round must focus on communities and underserved regions, and we continue to advocate for an effective and broadly based applicant support program, which we hope will expand the registry pool. We believe that the namespace expansion must remain conservative in order to minimize the risk of end user confusion and associated risk and harm. And the contention set resolution mechanism must not disadvantage target applicants, and the registry commitments must serve as effective safeguards and should not reduce without strong reasoning. We also had a session on this called the Unraveling the Next Round of New GTLDs for Community-Based TLD Applications. As the name suggests, we wanted to understand and explore how the next round applicant guidebook, which was up for public comments in May, and the other implications of the ICANN's board-adopted consensus policy recommendations and other directions will have impact on the applicant support program. And there were diverse views, etc., in this session, so this was interesting. The other key important area was the reviews. At large, we believe that the Accountability and Transparency Review, also called as ATRT4, should proceed on schedule. A few days back, the ICANN board made a decision to defer the ATRT4, which we feel disregards the bylaw requirements and the principles of continuous accountability and transparency. And as the ATRT4 process is a fundamental accountability mechanism designed to ensure that ICANN remains responsive to its community and operates in the public interest, we believe that the postponing directly and adversely impacts the effectiveness of the review process and the community's ability to hold ICANN accountable. And therefore, ALAC is considering filing a request for reconsideration. Apart from this, we had an interesting discussion related to the removal of the words diversity and inclusion from ICANN's public-facing website. And just yesterday from the AP-RALO, the Asia Pacific Regional at-Large Organization, we have submitted a request to the chair of the board and the CEO to at least have this reinstated by modifying the text, at least for the community-facing websites. Apart from it, we had bilaterals with the Government Advisory Committee. Ian, I'm sure, would be speaking more, with the SSAC and the GNSO's non-commercial stakeholder group. With the GAC, we normally discuss more on DNS mitigation, the next GTLD program, especially the applicant support program, the UA, and the multilingual internet. With SSAG, it was more on safer cyber campaign, name collision, DNS blocking, and exploring how we can further collaborate. With the GNSO's non-commercial stakeholder group, we had discussions on human rights assessment, operational security, stability, resilience, and how we can synergize better. And we also participated in the community's WSIS plus 20 discussions, where GNSO has come up with a mapping, and we believe even CCNSO as well as at-large plan to also have a similar mapping from our constituency. So I'll stop at this, Annalise. These were, there are other things which went on, but these were the primary things. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Amrita. Just a reminder that we'll be taking questions at the end of all the presentations, but please feel free to pop your questions into the Q&A pod as you think of them. So next we have Ian Sheldon, Australia's representative in the Governmental Advisory Committee, to share what governments were concerned about. Over to you, Ian.
Thanks, Annalise. My name's Ian Sheldon, and I'm the Director of the Intergovernance team here in the Department of Infrastructure. And thank you again to auDA for hosting this readout. So the Governmental Advisory Committee, or the GAC, had another successful meeting in Prague with 80 members and 9 observers in attendance at the hybrid meeting. It was a surprisingly short week, so it was quite challenging to squeeze in all of the sessions and discussions we needed to have. Much like Amrita mentioned, the GAC had quite a number of bilats with other parts of the community, including with the At-Large Advisory Committee, the Generic Name Supporting Organization, the Stability and Security Advisory Committee, and the Address Supporting Organization. And of course, with the ICANN board as well. We always value these bilateral conversations, and it's vital that the GAC remain well connected with the rest of the community, particularly as we approach the next round. Like in many prior meetings, the GAC spent some time discussing quite a number of recurrent issues in the lead up to the next round of GTLDs, including things like data accuracy, urgent requests, as well as things like DNS abuse and the applicant support program. So just on the applicant support program, I think given there are only 5 months left for applications, the GAC was of the view that it would be good to conduct a review, which was, I think, previously expected to take place at the 20 completed application mark. But from my understanding, we only have 4 successfully completed applications, so it might be good to start looking into the review of the program and taking a closer look at its success and how we might want to tailor some of its implementation going forward. Coming back to DNS abuse, this was, of course, a topic of keen interest to the GAC, as it has been for quite a number of prior meetings. But we're certainly feeling the pressure mount again as we approach the next round to continue to make some good progress on this issue. So this was one of the only bits of advice that we did issue in the communique, which explicitly linked our expectations to the next round, to DNS abuse, and setting a timeline for the commencement of the policy development process at ICANN84. So this is probably some of the most clear-eyed and concrete expectations that we've had on this. So we'd be keen to see how these conversations go over the next couple of months before the Oman meeting. Of course, it was good to see the community starting to respond to these issues as well. The GAC very much welcomed the DNS Abuse Institute white paper on DNS abuse, and start to see some more creative approaches to tackling this topic get put down on paper, and for the community to start coalesce on sensible and practical ways forward. In that vein, it was good to see the community start to agree on a lot of these issues, and it seemed like there was far more consensus at this meeting than there was in prior meetings. It feels like the community is getting themselves organized and working on preparing itself for the next round. It was also great to see a good discussion in the CCNSO, which I think Bruce can probably talk to, on the scams and financial crimes. As you know, the government has a key focus on continuing to protect consumers, and it's our view that the CCNSO is a fantastic venue to explore some of these intersects between kind of government interests and the broader multi-stakeholder community, with CCTLDs playing a leading role in a lot of these spaces. It was also excellent to see strong ICANN community turnout for the next gen presentations as well. Often prior meetings, the next gen is forgotten about in the wash of a busy schedule. So it was fantastic to see good turnout to listen to the presentations, all of which were outstanding quality. The GAC also held a the GAC's in mourning as we reflected on the recent loss of our good UK colleague Nigel Hickson. So the GAC held a memorial at the conclusion of one of the days to hear from the community and reflect back on all their memories and reflections on our good friend Nigel. And that was quite a surprising time to hear kind of how broad Nigel's impact was across the community, how many friends he had across all the various spaces, and it was quite good to see some of the pictures of younger Nigel in his earlier days at ICANN, and his attendance at various meetings. Much like the ALAC, the WSIS was also a key topic of discussion across quite a number of spaces. A lot of my colleagues are preparing to navigate this conversation over the next couple of months. It's a little bit separate to the ICANN83 meeting, but I did also want to mention that the Australian government has recently published a non-paper outlining some of our ideas to spark some of the discussion and thinking Unfortunately, we weren't able to have it ready to talk about in Prague. But if this is something that you are interested in and are planning to come to the IGF or following more of the broader WSIS conversations, please feel free to email us at internetgovernance@communications.gov.au, and we're very happy to share a copy of the paper with you. So I think all up, it was quite a busy week in Prague. Like I said, trying to fit in bilaterals and corridor conversations across 4 days of meetings. If you are keen to learn a little bit more about the GAC's more concrete thoughts, please do have a look at the communique, as it's the distillation of the GAC's thoughts across the week. And as the GAC also tinkers with new ways of drafting this communique process as well. We tried some new methods of drafting to try and introduce some more efficiencies in this. So certainly would welcome thoughts from this community if you think the communique is improved or it's a little bit more succinct than in prior instances. I think that's it from me. I'm sure there are questions from the attendees, but happy to take them at the end. Thanks, Annalise.
Thanks very much, Ian. Busy meeting for the GAC as always, and just to acknowledge, as I don't think it's just the GAC in mourning for Nigel. I think his loss will be felt across the entire ICANN community and the internet governance community more broadly. Sort of been involved for a very long time and will be very much missed. So I will now hand over to Manju Chen. Thank you for joining us, Manju. Manju's a member of the Generic Name Supporting Organisation Council, and she'll be sharing an update from her perspective. Over to you, Manju.
Thank you. Thank you, Annalise. Sorry for the coughing. And yes, definitely we all miss Nigel very much. I think I saw a lot of tears, including myself in that session. Like Annalise said, I'm on the GNSO Council. I represent the non-commercial stakeholder group from the GNSO on the GNSO Council. And since, because of that, I think I'll share the highlights of GNSO according to our council agenda during the prep meeting. I'm sharing the link to our chat, but I noticed this is a panelist only chat, so I'll rely on whoever is in charge of this to share it with the attendees. So according to our agenda, definitely we in the GNSO, we recognize the concerns shared by the community about DNS abuse. We heard already from ALAC and GAC about how, this is there's a shared urgency in a sense in the community of dealing with this issue. And GNSO is also trying to, from our perspective and what we're our function in the ICANN community, trying to see how we can be dealing with this issue. So there's actually a DNS abuse small team going on within the GNSO Council. The chair of the small team is Jennifer Chum, as I think if you were in the readout for Seattle, probably you already know her. And this small team, mostly they will be working on, for example, review the 2022 small team effort. We had a small team on DNS abuse already in 2022, and then finish. We kind of recharter and reactivate the small team to review the effort. And then also, since the contract amendment happened in between, the small team will be assessing the impact of this contract amendment. And also, I guess I'm not sure if everybody knows, but there has been this informal study released by the ICANN.org. I will rely on whoever is in charge of the chat to share the links of this informal study from the ICANN OCTO on DNS abuse, and they provide several recommendations or observations. And I think most importantly, and what the community wants to see or want to see how what like GNSO Council will be taking actions is really, are we going to start any policy development processes? And that's definitely a huge discussion point during our council meetings. We are discussing how to best start these processes because, as Ian mentioned, there's this net beacon white paper. And as Amrita mentioned, there's this wish to start with the bulk registration, despite there's no currently shared consensus on what bulk registration means. So there are a lot of ideas of what a possible narrow scope PDP looks like and what a possible topic of that narrow PDP will look like. We're discussing whether we do multiple narrow scoped PDPs or we do a long, large PDPs with many narrowly scoped phases. That was a discussion happening in Prague. I think we will definitely continue on discussing that and identify the best way to carry out the process. Another important issues, of course, also echoing the concerns from the community is data accuracy. And when we're saying data accuracy, basically it's the accuracy of registration data of the domain names. There's also a small team going on. We are discussing kind of incremental improvements of the current accuracy requirements. We don't want to jump too far because we recognize there's a huge gap between two different opinions in the communities. So primarily, we think most importantly, really, we need more education for the registrant. We need to tell them more before and after and during when they're registering a domain. You know, the importance of keeping their data accurate and what will happen if they don't keep their data accurate. So that's kind of preliminary recommendations this small team is going to send to the council. And of course, because there are a lot of tasks on the table, the council has been discussing, you know, how do we prioritize what is ahead. So we did kind of an overview of the tasks ahead and try to discuss priorities. And there's this board readiness small team going on also in the Geneso Council. This small team basically it wants to address the gaps we kind of identified in the past few years about this inconsistency of Geneso policy recommendations sent to the board, and then we thought this is a community consensusly supported recommendations, but then the board will non-adopt them due to various reasons. And how do we kind of avoid these things happening in the future? This is what the small team basically is about. They are envisioning to wrap up this work by this year, and hopefully, you know, we can improve our processes and improve how we write our recommendations in the future to avoid this kind of community expected something to be done because it's you know, through the consensus process we already kind of struggle and then put out these recommendations, but then it was turned out at the end by the board, and there's a lot of disappointment. Those kind of issues, those kind of situations, we're hoping to kind of avoid as much as possible in the future. Like other two minor topics, well, I wouldn't say minor, sorry, just last but not least kind of topics. One is registration data request service. As you know, it has been running for almost 1.5 years. And I think there's a standing committee on the Geneso to kind of monitor this request service and see what improvements are needed about the service. They are going to release their report most probably in August, the coming August, and this report will be open for public comments. So whoever is interested to review and provide comments are welcome. We will definitely appreciate your comments. Last but not least, again, reviews. Amrita has touched on this. In Geneso, I think mostly because we represent diverse interests in our group. we are mostly really just exploring whether there are alignments within all stakeholder groups and constituencies within the GNSO, and that's what we're doing now. If there are certain alignments, I think we'll identify, what best vehicle we can use to kind of deliver our opinion to the board and share with the community. And surprisingly, we actually don't care about new GTODs that much, I guess. But yeah, that's us from the council side. Happy to answer more questions when we're all finished. Thank you.
Thanks, Manju. And next, I'll invite the chair of the Security and Stability Advisory Committee, Ram Mohan, to share his thoughts. Over to you, Ram.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me here. It's always a pleasure to be a part of this team, Annalise, so appreciate it. So the Security and Stability Advisory Committee at this meeting was primarily focused on showcasing a seminal document that we released, SAC 127. This was DNS blocking revisited. And what this really focuses on is the now standard and then unique, but now standard practice of regulators, ISPs, other parts of the ecosystem in the internet starting to block access to the internet, but blocking such access at the DNS level. So this is a paper that sets out to speak about both what it is, but also what some of the unexpected side effects of such blocking could be. For example, and the paper is studded with examples of unexpected and unintended consequences. Something significant that happened in Italy, something significant that happened in other parts of the world due to an inadvertent and overbroad blocking at the DNS level. The SSAC has issued 3 sets of recommendations for those who actually are intent on or have national jurisdictional laws that require them to actually block. One of them says, actually know what you're trying to block and understand what you're trying to do before you do it. We find in some cases that the organizations that did the blocking didn't fully understand the impact of what the block was going to accomplish, and they had, in some cases, entire outages. There was one case where Google Drive and YouTube was blocked for an entire region due to not fully understanding what the block request was going to do. We also have a set of some guidelines in terms of if you were to do blocking, how to do it in a responsible way, how to do it in a way that actually informs the people, the end users who are going to be affected by the blocking, informs them that blocking is being effectuated. And the third recommendation that the SSAC has also made is for those who are doing blocking to take advantage of a new protocol extension, a DNS extension that has been created in the official protocols that specifically allows for a response that says that the DNS has been blocked. So that was very good sessions. We met with, as Amrita said, we had met with the ALAC, but we also met with the GAC on this. We spoke about this at several sessions. Lots of interest in the recommendations and in the study that we have published. The paper is public. You can Google it. It's just look for SAC 127, and you will be able to get a copy of the paper. The other area that the SSAC teased out was work that is underway to analyze the impact of open source software in DNS infrastructure. It turns out that at the critical layers of the internet, there is a profusion of open source software that is in use, and the SSAC is going about both documenting this. We are conducting a first ever survey at critical infrastructure providers, and we will publish a report that both speaks to the extent of open source software that is being used in DNS infrastructure, but also we intend to shine a light on risk management and on appropriate mitigation measures that could be taken. We also hope to put to bed some myths about open source software and demonstrate how crucial a role open source software plays in the internet that we know and we rely upon today. So that is that report will be, we expect to publish that before the next ICANN meeting that is going to happen in Muscat. So that's the second thing I wanted to share. The last thing I wanted to share was the launch. This happened just before the ICANN meeting. We launched this is not SSAC, but it's related to resilience, was the launch of a global coalition, a coalition on digital impact, CODI, which focuses on introducing language as a key part of digital inclusion so that we can achieve digital impact. This was launched in mid-May. auDA is a charter member and is part of this coalition. This also coincided with a celebration at the ICANN meeting, celebrating 10 years of work on universal acceptance of domain names and internationalized domain names, as well as longer domain names. And while it was a celebration, the clear message was this is one of those cases where 10 years does not make an overnight success. There is still quite a lot of work left to be done to have new top-level domains and internationalized domain names actually be accepted and used in platforms and in applications worldwide. Back to you, Annalise.
Thanks very much, Ram. I see there is a question in the Q&A, so I will come to that at the end. But please, if you have questions, pop them in the chat, in the Q&A pod now, and we'll come to questions after our last speaker. So I'll hand over to you, Bruce, for highlights from the country code name supporting organisation.
Great, thanks, Annalise. So the country code name supporting organisation is a multi-day conference, essentially, happening within the ICANN meeting. The first day on the Monday is a focus on technical presentations from each of the, or from several of the country code operators. The Czech country code gave a sort of detailed presentation on work they're doing, particularly in the area of digital identity, and how that's fitting into sort of new European standards on digital identity. Generally, I'd say the Europeans are probably 10 years ahead of where we are in Australia on that front, but certainly it's a rapidly developing area. Also presentations on implementation of DNSSEC and different ways of improving that, which is a security approach for encrypting domain name information. Another big topic area is referring to work that relates to the World Summit of Information Society, or WSIS. It's 20 years since the United Nations essentially convened a group and having a look at the impact of information technology on society, and in particular how to address, I guess, the gap between the developed nations, the sort of the G7 countries like Australia that are obviously very developed in their use of information technology versus other countries that are less developed, and how that gap can be addressed. And that conversation in the CCNSO was really about what country code operators have been doing within their region to help some of those that have been less fortunate. And for example, Canada presented on various activities that they had in what we would call it out of their public benefit program. Included things like in the city of Ottawa, where they provide a free Wi-Fi service to help people that can't afford internet connectivity to be able to access the internet, and various other programs that they have. And there was generally a theme, I guess, is that most of the country codes that are operating as not-for-profit organisations are making a conscious effort to invest any surplus funds into essentially what I'd call broadly digital inclusion programs, and they all sort of do it slightly differently. So there's a set of presentations that will hopefully be available on the ICANN website that gives that detail, but the overall theme, I think, was what can we do, including .au, to help disadvantaged parts of the Australian community get online as well. Universal acceptance, again, is a topic. This essentially relates to the use of different languages on websites and the use of different languages in domain names, and ensuring that they're accepted in common internet applications such as websites and being able to input information in a language other than English, for example. Financial contributions is a topic in the country code land. Country codes provide contributions to ICANN in proportion to their size. So, for example, auDA contributes $150,000 a year based on a registry that I think is over 2.5 million names. And the CCNSO is sort of revisiting that and creating a few additional bands with the aim of encouraging more countries to contribute to the costs of ICANN. There was a CCTLD news session. Alan Cameron, the chair of auDA, gave a presentation on the governance of auDA over the last 5 years and some of the lessons learnt and experiences. Other country codes, including the Czech registry, gave updates on the various initiatives that they are working on. It was interesting that the Czech registry has diversified such that 46% of their revenue now comes from outside of domain name registration. And that includes things such as they provide DNS software and also digital identity services. There was a session on sort of DNS abuse or financial scams. In ICANN, DNS abuse has a specific meaning, which is related to the use of domain names for phishing, spelled PHISING, and botnets and malware. The CCNSO has been working on that now for a few years and has run a number of surveys, and overall countries are putting quite a bit of effort into reducing the amount of DNS abuse that happens in their country codes. The shift now is actually towards going a bit broader. And so in this session, we had a presentation from the FBI talking about just broadly cybercrime. And they had said that the cybercrime in the US, I think last year, was $16 billion, which is quite extraordinary. And that's bigger than the drug trade, essentially, in the US in terms of a criminal enterprise. And that's up 33% on the previous year. So the use of the internet for crime is growing. And they talked about various types. The most predominant one that they come across is phishing. We talked about, I gave a presentation on sort of .au approach and what Australia is doing in the broader area of online scams, and talked about the scams prevention framework that the Treasury Department has worked on, which is looking at not just what the domain name industry does, but recognising that scams require a number of elements, including telecommunications. They usually start with an SMS message or a social media message. Then there's some sort of domain name involved, and then some sort of bank account involved to collect the money from the scam. And so approaches to address that need to really look at how do you disrupt that whole system. And each provider, whether it's a bank or a telecommunications company or a domain registry, needs to look at the data that they have and do their best to try and disrupt. And if we're all doing our part, then that overall disrupts the ability to conduct cybercrime. So that presentation was quite well received. I got a lot of feedback following that on perhaps the framework that we're using and how that could be more broadly applied. That's probably the main topics within the CCNSO itself. The themes, though, just to summarise, because I think I heard this across several of the presentations, including from Ian Sheldon in the GAC and the presentations in ALAC and GNSO as well. But sort of themes for the week were, one theme was around DNS abuse and some new additional policy to help mitigate that. A couple of the key areas, and this is included in the GAC communique, the Government Advisory Committee communique, was to say that often scams come in bursts of names. So it's rarely just an individual domain name that gets registered for a scam. They'll often register hundreds of names at once. And they assume that if a registry takes down one name, they've still got hundreds of other names that they still have active. And so one of the areas of focus is saying is when a registry or registrar identifies a domain name that's been used for some sort of scam, to have a look at other names that might have been registered at the same time. So the concept of bulk registrations, where someone's registering 100 names within 5 minutes, and also the concept of looking for related names that might be associated with the same account at a registrar or a reseller. And so these are areas where the community is starting to consider, should we conduct policy development work in that area? And the Government Advisory Committee is saying, yes, the faster you can get on with that work, the better. And they had recommended a couple of areas for focus for the policy work in the GNSO, or the generic top-level names organisation. So that was sort of a theme throughout the week in the different sessions. Basically, the same content gets presented in each of the parallel conferences that happens at ICANN. New GTLDs, there was that mention again. A lot of that is the plan ICANN has is to open up for another round next year. And part of that is to make sure that we have as many protections in place to prevent DNS abuse if further names get created. Generally, the topic around reviews, which was basically part of the ICANN model, is that ICANN reviews the efficiency of its processes. And one of the frustrations in the community, I think, is that policy development around topics like DNS abuse have been quite slow. The last changes were done as contractual negotiation between the registries and registrars and ICANN, and were not actually done as part of a ICANN policy process. So a lot of focus was on use the ICANN policy process so that everybody can be involved. So it's truly multi-stakeholder, but have that policy development focused on a few key topics, one of which could be bulk registrations. So that was that concept around how does ICANN get more efficient, and how can we implement a review in the short term that looks at ICANN as a whole, because what's tended to emerge is sort of a series of silos, if you like. There's a government advisory silo, a country code silo, a GTLD silo, and an ALAC silo, and then almost running parallel meetings covering the same topics on different days. And so is there a way of organising ICANN meetings to be more efficient, and making sure that the policy development process can be done in a time frame that's not measured in years, but could be measured in months. And so there's a lot of pent-up demand, if you like, for a review that really considers those bigger questions about how to make ICANN more efficient. So that is all from my summary, Annalise.
Thanks for that, Bruce. And just another reminder, the question that was in the chat has been addressed in writing, so thank you for that, Ian. If there are any questions, pop them in the Q&A pod now. I've got a question that I wanted to perhaps put to everybody. Manju, during your presentation, you said that there is more education needed for registrants on the importance of data accuracy. And since that's sort of kind of fundamental to a lot of the DNS abuse problems, knowing who is behind a domain name, whose responsibility would you say it is? And Amrita, the ALAC, may have a view on this as well. Like, is it the responsibility of a registrar, the registry, the government, ICANN? Who should be doing this education about why registration data needs to be accurate in the first place? And what happens when it isn't? Is there any discussion in the GNSO or elsewhere on that?
Thank you, Annalise. So first of all, I guess I'll just quickly edit. I mentioned that there are two very different kind of on the spectrum. There are very two different, I guess, view of what accuracy means when it comes to registration data accuracy. There are, for example, from where I am, the non-commercial stakeholder group, we are mostly with the contracted parties, which stands for registries and registrars. We will definitely think that accuracy only means contactability. So as long as you can contact the registrant from the registration data they provided, this data is considered accurate. But there are different kind of opinions which thinks that accuracy means that you have to verify the data or the identity of the registrant. They want you to provide whatever identity, certification or proof that you are the person that register for the data. So I guess I really need to mention that there's a difference in this understanding of accuracy. So that's why in the small team, we kind of wanted to just make incremental improvement understanding this huge gap between the two different understandings. So when it comes to education, I think we definitely will want to rely on ICANN.org to release more materials. For example, they have all these beautiful diagrams on how to register domain names, or like what to happen if DNS abuse. They have the power to do beautiful things for their information, for the NIJTOD application whatsoever. So we will definitely rely on ICANN.org to release more resources. But I think this responsibility of educating registrants, we will expect, or we will wish, are shared by registries, registrars, and the ICANN.org, and registrants ourselves. But we are the one who have to be educated, and in the non-commercial sector group, we don't have as much as the resources and money to do that. But we are definitely always willing to work with whoever has the money and resource to put out any educational tools for this. And we're hoping if this recognition go through coming from council, will kind of urge the ICANN.org and the contrary party side to pay more attention to this educational need. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thanks, Manju. I'm not sure whether anybody else wants to. Bruce, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, just broadly comment on the topic of accuracy. Certainly, a lot of the country code operators have some kind of national presence requirement. So Canada does, Australia does, Singapore does. And so those country codes tend to do some sort of validation that the person is from the country that they say they are. Other TLDs take a more of a risk approach to it. And so they basically want to have their registration process be relatively lightweight on the basis that 99% of people are providing accurate information. And then have steps after registration if they see something that doesn't look accurate to follow up. So several of the countries use that approach. One of the things that's happened in the European environment is that the European Union has issued, I can't remember whether it's a directive or guidance. I think it might be a directive, but that country codes within Europe apply a sort of know your customer approach, which is some validation of the data at the time of registration. Each country is implementing that in a different way, and each country code registry is implementing that in a different way. So there's, if you like, fragmentation of approaches within Europe to how to address that problem. But the broader sense is other environments are sort of saying, well, given the Europeans are already doing that, and given the registrars in Europe are already having to comply with those new regulations, then perhaps that's something that could be considered more globally. But you know, the counter argument is that people are trying to keep the cost of registration low, and they, given the majority of registrants are doing the right thing to keep the cost low for them, and then have some sort of risk-based approach, and bulk registrations is an example of that, where if you're getting a lot of registrations from one particular registrant, then that's an example that's relatively high risk, and you might want to take additional steps to validate that user, or investigate that user.
Thanks, Bruce. It does seem like this issue would benefit from some plenary discussions. Like it's been a long-standing issue, and it sort of touches on you know, government concerns. You mentioned the FBI presentation where cybercrime is more costly than the drug trade. I think we perhaps could have some cross-community discussion on what the problems are, what the various solutions are in various different places, and see if we can at least have a common understanding. Amrita, I see your hand up as well.
Yes, thank you, Annalise. As in, from the at-large community, accuracy of data is something which we feel is important. While we understand, you know, you need to maintain privacy of certain domain registry, you know, people who register their domain. But at the end of the day, we feel this, if you do not have the accurate data, the issue of DNS abuse or mitigation, it's very linked issue. We feel, and therefore the accuracy of the data is important. And your question as to who would address it, I think the entire ecosystem has to work on it. It could not be just one. For example, you know, if you have one is having the necessary information at the ICANN website, which is easy to access. For example, what are being done, what are the one is what are the best practices which are being followed, or what are the new measures which has been taken. Also having, as Manju was mentioning, a better education material which can go across the community, because not all people who are also reselling domain names, etc., have that much of understanding or education as the big ones would have somewhere. So educating even the registrars or the registries is important. Why it is beneficial for them, you know, sometimes, you know, they try to balance between cost, time, innovation, etc., as in how that can also help them, as well as, you know, even government and law enforcement, that not all issues are happen, you know, when you're having abuse, etc. Not everything is at the domain level. It can happen at the content level. Yes, issues are critical, but how do you differentiate it, or how do you educate people as to whom they need to reach for an issue, I think is important. So capacity building at all levels is important, and having the information at proper places, easy to understand for the different communities, is important. Thank you.
You're on mute, Annalise.
Thanks, Ram. I was just responding to what Amrita said, but I will just pass straight over to you, and you can chime in.
Thank you. The SSAC has, over the years, provided guidance on domain registration data access. And we've got publication SAC 101, SAC 118, and SAC 122. All of these urge the creation of an access system that adhere to really 4 principles. One, that access should be structured and expedited, especially where there are urgent requests. It has to be handled efficiently and predictably. Second is that data access ought to be policy-driven, with policies that are clear on response times and procedures. The current methodologies have a lot of ambiguity for a lot of parties involved. The third principle is that such data access should be transparent and data informed. And ICANN, we really think, should be reporting and sharing metrics on data requests that are coming in. And finally, we want to assert that access to domain registration data access, appropriate access in the right circumstances, is foundational to security. And so we've provided that feedback. At the end of the day, all of the domain registration data access is really to ensure that the internet community is protected against security threats. And it has to balance the privacy component as well. But in some ways, perhaps the pendulum is not really balanced and in the middle for registration data access.
Thanks, Ram. I think it was Ian who noted the seems to be more of an appetite for discussion of creative approaches to solving all of these issues. So I hope that continues and we can find a way forward. We've got just a few minutes. Ian, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Thanks, Annalise. I mean, we've only got a couple of minutes left. I won't comment too much on registration data. I mean, we could have a whole separate discussion. It sounds like there's appetite from this community to even have one of these domestically. I think there might be some value in the Australian community drilling down on what do we think about this issue and how do we kind of try and drive these issues forward. And just picking up on Ram's comment. One of the things that the GAC did drill down into is we kind of learned that the validation of registration data only the timeline for validation verification is 15 days. And in the world of cybersecurity threats, 15 days is a very, very long time when often it's a matter of hours to tackle and take down some of these things. So tackling these types of aspects may result in much swifter action and more easy to address issues, but it requires, like Amrita said, a whole of community effort. I think certainly there are touch points with registrants that kind of have that first point of contact, but it requires all parts of the community to tackle this. But just briefly, I just wanted to come back to Keith's comment. Unfortunately, we don't have a copy of the report available online, but I do have a hard copy here. So if this community is looking to come to IGF in Oslo, the Australian government will have a booth with Tim Tams, koalas, hopefully an inflatable koala suit like we had last year, but certainly we'll have a lot of hard copies of this WSIS review non-paper as well, which is really designed to help those who mightn't be following this negotiation get down to the details a little bit more. Well, we know the WSIS review is going to be very broad. It's going to touch on quite a large number of aspects across the digital landscape. And so we wanted to collate a lot of those ideas in a single document to help spur some creative thinking on making sure that the WSIS review is forward-leaning and it does proactively address some of the concerns from a lot of developing countries. To make sure that the next iteration of WSIS is inclusive and helps bring the millions of those who are still disconnected online. So it's not government policy, but it's designed to help bring many others along the conversation as possible, so that everybody can partake in the negotiations when they do start to pick up pace. So thanks again.
Thanks, Ian. And that does bring us almost to time. So thank you to all of our speakers today. Thank you especially to those of you who are still suffering from jet lag. The recording of this webinar will be published in the coming days, and as always, if you are not already a member, please consider joining us as a .au member to stay up to date and be involved in the Australian internet community. I think it's been a very interesting discussion today. I think there is certainly more to say on a DNS abuse discussion and on the WSIS as well. So you can sign up via our website and watch out for our social media updates on events such as this. And thank you all for joining us. Hope to see you again soon. Thanks, everyone.
So much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.